People mocked Captain Riley Thompson as she approached the Apache helicopter, insisting women had no place flying combat missions. But when 500 troops found themselves surrounded by hostile forces in what would become the military's worst crisis in decades, she was ready to show everyone that being the deadliest aviator in the skies has nothing to do with being male. This is Captain Riley Thompson at age. Her sharp blue eyes could pierce through heavy mist, her reddish-brown hair stayed perfectly in place even during half-day missions, and her skilled hands could guide an Apache through incoming rockets like a graceful, lethal dance. Standing just over 5.5 feet tall and weighing 135 pounds, she could outmaneuver bigger aviators who had twice the arrogance, yet none of this impressed the personnel at Fort Liberty Army Base in North Carolina. They still viewed her as simply the female aviator, someone unusual, an experimental choice, a diversity requirement that headquarters had imposed on actual fighters. Nobody would dare speak openly, but Riley caught the hushed comments, noticed the dismissive looks whenever she walked into the aviators' meeting space, and sensed the distrust each time she approached a multi-million-dollar aircraft. But this particular day would be unlike any other. Everything Riley had prepared for, every challenge she had overcome, every question mark hanging over her abilities would soon face the ultimate test in the most disastrous circumstances imaginable. The urgent alarm started blaring just before 6 in the morning, slicing through the quiet darkness like a blade. Riley was already conscious, running through her daily preparation in the compact living space she maintained with perfect order. Morning coffee, checking conditions, inspecting gear, the identical pattern she had maintained throughout 8 years of service. All aviators report to the meeting room right away. This is an actual emergency. The announcement through the speakers held a seriousness that twisted Riley's gut. She recognized that sound from her time in Syria when situations collapsed within seconds. She snatched her uniform and sprinted. The meeting room was pure disorder. 12 aviators gathered around a massive tactical screen displaying satellite pictures that drained the color from everyone's faces. Colonel Marcus Hayes, who commanded the squadron, appeared as though he'd lost a decade in just 1 hour. "Pay attention," Hayes shouted. Around 4:30 this morning, Bravo Battalion was running a standard patrol close to the disputed area when they stumbled straight into the biggest hostile trap we've encountered in 5 years. 500 troops, a complete battalion, are stuck in a valley with absolutely no way to reach them from the ground. The space became dead quiet except for humming equipment and the far-off noise of helicopters powering up outside. The opposing force has positioned anti-aircraft weapons in the hills around them. Hayes went on, gesturing at the screen. "We've already lost 2 Chinook transports and a Black Hawk during the last hour and a half attempting to rescue our people. The conditions are getting rapidly worse. We have incoming weather systems that will ground all flights within 4 hours." Captain Jake Morrison, the squadron's veteran aviator, lifted his hand. "Commander, respectfully, this seems like work for Air Force bombers, not helicopters. We cannot approach for any rescue with those anti-aircraft systems operational. The bombers cannot assist us," Hayes answered grimly. "Our troops are positioned too near civilian areas. A single misplaced bomb creates a global crisis. This demands careful extraction and it must happen immediately." Riley examined the tactical screen while other aviators argued about flight paths and armament choices. The valley was a killing zone, limited entry routes, elevated ground surrounding everything, several anti-aircraft positions with crossing fields of fire. Any helicopter entering would be navigating through a corridor of ground-to-air rockets, explosive projectiles, and heavy gunfire. "Who's accepting this assignment?" asked Captain Tommy Rodriguez. Though his words suggested he understood nobody was eager to volunteer for what appeared to be certain death. Hayes scanned the room. "I require volunteers. I will not command anyone to attempt this operation. The chances of making it back are extremely small." Quiet stretched for half a minute that seemed like half an hour. Riley could sense her pulse pounding in her head, could feel the burden of every comment she'd overheard about females not fitting into combat aviation, every wisecrack about women aviators being too sensitive for intense pressure. "I'll accept it," Riley stated calmly. Every person in the room looked toward her. The silence grew overwhelming. Captain Morrison actually laughed out loud. "Seriously, Riley, this is not practice. We're discussing 500 human lives here." "I understand that perfectly," Riley answered, her tone solid as stone. "Listen, dear," stated Captain Brad Collins. an aviator who constantly reminded Riley she was unwelcome. This demands someone capable of managing the stress, who will not panic when the rockets begin launch. Perhaps you should remain with cargo flights. Riley sensed the known warmth of frustration building in her core, but she'd discovered years ago to direct that power into concentration instead of rage. My flight history proves my ability. I've recorded more combat time than everyone here besides Colonel Hayes. Combat time transporting equipment and people. Morrison interrupted. This is something else entirely. This involves split-second choices under the most severe stress conceivable. Colonel Hayes raised his palm for silence. Thompson, you grasp the dangers. This goes beyond dangerous. It's probably a fatal assignment. The numbers do not favor us. Riley moved nearer to the tactical screen, examining the landscape with the focus of a doctor reviewing medical images. Commander, I observe 3 potential flight paths. The northern path takes us through the densest anti-aircraft coverage, but provides the ideal rescue locations. The southern route is lengthier but could bypass some rocket positions. The eastern passage is suicidal. Too restricted, too many bottlenecks. Hayes nodded with approval. If we employ a modified terrain-hugging strategy, remaining under 50 feet until final approach, we could potentially evade tracking systems until we're committed to the landing area. The Apache's defense package should provide us a reasonable opportunity against portable rockets. And once you reach the pickup zone, asked Morrison, how precisely do you intend to evacuate 500 troops with a single helicopter? Riley had been considering that precise challenge. Repeated flights, rapid insertions and withdrawals. Touchdown. Pack in as many as feasible. Depart. Repeat. The Apache can transport 8 equipped troops if we remove unnecessary equipment. That equals over 60 flights. Collins figured. The hostile force will not permit you 60 entries into their trap. Then I suppose I need to move quickly. Riley stated plainly. The space erupted in disagreement. Half the aviators believed she'd lost her mind. The remaining half believed she was both insane and unfit. But Riley had stopped listening to the argument. She was analyzing the assignment details, determining fuel needs, mapping routes, and mentally readying herself for what could be her final mission. Colonel Hayes demanded quiet. Thompson, I value your bravery, but Captain Morrison has a point. This assignment demands our most skilled aviator. Respectfully, Commander, Riley stated. Skill means little if the skilled aviators refuse the assignment. Morrison's expression flushed. I never claimed I wouldn't. Then volunteer. Riley interrupted him. Immediately, announce you'll attempt this operation. Morrison opened his lips, then shut them. The quiet that came next spoke volumes. Hayes scanned the room once more. Anyone else stepping forward? No hands rose. No words came. The space filled with combat aviators, individuals who'd flown through hostile fire and survived to share their tales, remained silent while a female half their stature volunteered for an assignment they all deemed impossible. Thompson, Hayes stated finally, you have clearance for instant departure. Use Apache 77 Alpha. It possesses the latest defense system and full ammunition capacity. Your radio name for this operation will be Guardian Angel. Riley acknowledged and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she caught Morrison whisper to Collins, she'll be gone within 20 minutes. Then we'll need to dispatch a qualified aviator to fix the disaster. Riley stopped at the entrance without turning back. Captain Morrison, when I return those 500 troops safely, I expect a public acknowledgement for every uncertainty you voiced about female aviators. Is that agreeable? Morrison scoffed. Sweetheart, if you somehow accomplish this, I'll personally suggest you for the highest military decoration. I'll remember that, Riley stated and departed. The flight area was organized madness. Maintenance teams were readying Apache 77 Alpha with the speed of a racing crew. Riley completed her preparation routine with mechanical accuracy, but her thoughts were already at the objective, imagining approach directions and pickup sequences. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos, Riley's regular co-aviator, showed up beside her. Ma'am, respectfully, I want to attempt this operation with you. Riley regarded her. Santos was youthful, perhaps 25, with the sort of calm composure that created excellent flight crew. But this was not training. Maria, you have an infant at your residence. This is probably a one-way journey. Those 500 troops have relatives also, Santos answered. And if we're making repeated extraction flights, you'll require someone managing radio contact, navigation, and armament systems. You cannot accomplish it single-handedly, Riley acknowledged. Having Santos present would certainly enhance their odds somewhat. They entered the Apache and started the power-up process. The paired engines accelerated with a roar audible for miles. Riley sensed the known vibration throughout her frame as the helicopter awakened. This craft was an extension of her intention, an instrument that reacted to her thinking as much as her movements. Guardian Angel from Tower Command. You have clearance for instant takeoff. Weather opportunity is shrinking rapidly. You have perhaps 3 hours before conditions make flying unfeasible. Tower from Guardian Angel. Acknowledged. Starting departure routine. Riley raised the Apache from the concrete and instantly descended to 50 feet elevation. This would be a ground-level flight entirely to the objective area, remaining low enough to prevent tracking while high enough to avoid barriers. As they traveled toward the disputed region, Santos tracked radio messages from the surrounded battalion. The circumstances were worsening quickly. Hostile forces were gathering for what seemed to be a final attack. If those 500 troops were not rescued quickly, there could be nobody remaining to save. Guardian Angel, this is Bravo 6. Arrived a transmission through the radio. The signal was faint and filled with interference. We're depleting ammunition and have roughly 40 injured requiring urgent medical care. Hostile forces are organizing for another strike. Please inform on rescue schedule. Riley pressed her microphone button. Bravo 6. Guardian Angel. Arriving at your location in 12 minutes. Arrange for instant evacuation. Injured who can move first. Will transport as many as capacity allows per journey. Guardian Angel. Did you state per journey? Are you arranging repeated insertions into this area? Confirmed. Bravo 6. We're not abandoning anyone. There was silence. Guardian Angel. Be informed. This landing area is intensely hostile. We've already lost 3 helicopters. Suggest you cancel and await bomber assistance. Refused. Bravo 6. Bombers cannot assist you and we're not delaying. Guardian Angel approaching. Riley drove the Apache to its peak low-altitude velocity, gliding over terrain and valleys like a mechanical predator. The environment blurred past at 150 miles per hour, vegetation and structures flashing by in a green-brown streak. Enemy detected, Santos declared, her tone tense with focus. I have several tracking signals forward. Appears to be 3 anti-aircraft locations, with crossing coverage of the destination valley. Riley turned left, tracking a waterway that would guide them around the northernmost rocket position. Duration to destination, 8 minutes. Conditions worsen. I observe lightning forward. The initial rockets arrived without alert. Riley observed the vapor trails flash past the windshield before she caught Santos's pressing announcement. Rockets approaching. Turning left, Riley hurled the Apache into an aggressive defensive action, generating forces that squeezed her into her position like a massive palm. The helicopter jerked and spun through the atmosphere while Santos released countermeasures. Metal fragments and bright flares created to mislead approaching rockets. 2 additional launches, Santos announced. They have tracking lock. Riley descended the Apache into a thin gorge, navigating between stone barriers with perhaps 10 feet of space on either flank. The rockets, incapable of matching the helicopter's abrupt directional shift, struck uselessly against the gorge barriers. That explains why we navigate low, Riley whispered, returning the helicopter to working height. They emerged from the gorge and viewed the destination valley displayed ahead. It resembled a scene from the underworld. Vapor from destroyed vehicles, tracer ammunition crossing the atmosphere, detonations throwing earth and wreckage hundreds of feet upward. And surrounded by everything, 500 American troops battling for survival. Guardian Angel from Bravo 6, be informed landing area is receiving direct attack. Will release smoke to indicate our location. Riley observed a purple smoke device bloom in a tiny clearing roughly the dimensions of a sports court. Hostile locations on the nearby hills instantly redirected their attack toward the smoke, converting the landing area into a tempest of projectiles and explosive rounds. Santos, I require you to attack those locations on the eastern slope while I touch down. Acknowledged. Attacking objectives. The Apache's 30mm rapid-fire weapon started discharging, delivering explosive ammunition into hostile locations with crushing precision. Santos was a talented weapons handler, positioning each blast precisely where it would create maximum destruction. Riley descended the helicopter in a combat touchdown. Rapid, forceful, and with zero room for mistakes. The Apache struck the surface with sufficient impact to shake teeth, but they were grounded. Pack them in, Riley yelled through the communication system. Troops started cramming into the helicopter's passenger section. 8 individuals, all injured, some hardly aware. Riley verified numbers while Santos maintained suppressing hostile attack. We're filled. Arrived the announcement from the surface. Riley ascended instantly, rising just sufficient to pass the valley barriers before descending back to ground-level height. Behind them, hostile forces aimed their attack at vacant atmosphere. The journey back to headquarters consumed 15 minutes. Riley positioned the Apache at the medical center where combat physicians instantly started addressing the injured troops. She kept the engines running. Fuel and ammunition, she informed the maintenance team. Rapid as possible, ma'am, stated the team leader. Perhaps you should rest. You've been operating for fuel and ammunition, Riley stated. There are 49 T troops still present. The preparation consumed 12 minutes. Riley was airborne again before the team had completed securing the fuel connection. Santos entered back into the co-aviator position, her expression serious but resolved. How many additional journeys? She questioned. Riley calculated the numbers. 61 additional if we can transport 8 per journey, presuming we avoid being destroyed. The second insertion was more severe than the initial. Hostile forces had relocated their armament to aim at the landing area. Riley had to approach from an alternate direction, employing a ridgeline to hide her approach until the final instant. This occasion, the troops were prepared. The instant the Apache contacted the surface, 8 individuals rushed toward it while their fellow soldiers delivered protective fire. The packing consumed 45 seconds rather than 2 minutes. On the third journey, Riley received hostile fire straight on. A burst from a substantial machine weapon stitched openings across the Apache's body, missing the power plant by fractions. Alert indicators illuminated the cockpit like festive lights. We have fluid system issues, Santos announced. Reserve systems are adjusting, but if we lose main fluid systems, we're finished. Riley maintained flying. On the fourth journey, an explosive projectile detonated near enough to fracture the cockpit shield. On the fifth journey, she had to touch down amid direct explosive bombardment. On the sixth journey, Santos was injured by metal fragments that broke through the aircraft's protection. I'm okay, Santos maintained, though crimson was flowing down her limb. Continue operating. By the 10th journey, Riley had removed 8. By the 20th journey, 160 individuals were secure, but each insertion was growing more hazardous as hostile forces modified their approach and aimed more firepower at the landing area. On the 25th journey, catastrophe happened. A ground-to-air rocket launched from a hidden location struck the Apache's rear rotor. The helicopter instantly started rotating uncontrollably. Emergency, emergency, Santos transmitted through the radio. Guardian Angel is descending. Riley battled the instruments with every measure of power and ability she had. Without the rear rotor, the Apache desired to rotate like a toy, but she could employ the primary rotor's vertical and lateral instruments to somewhat adjust. Brace yourself. The helicopter struck the surface forcefully, rebounded once, and settled on its flank. Riley suspended in her restraints, dazed but aware. Santos was unaware, crimson flowing from a skull injury. Santos. Maria. Riley released herself and verified her co-aviator's heartbeat. Powerful and regular, she'd survive, but she required medical care. The radio sparked to activity. Guardian Angel, Bravo 6. We observed you descend. Can you reply? Riley pressed her microphone. Bravo 6. Guardian Angel, we're living, but aircraft is grounded. Maintain holding location. I'm going to attempt to reach your location walking. Refused. Guardian Angel, it's too hazardous. We'll dispatch a team to rescue you. Bravo 6. You lack troops to allocate, and I'm not finished with this assignment. How many individuals remain in your location? A silent. Guardian Angel, We have 29 today troops remaining. Riley performed rapid calculations. She'd already removed 20 suit individuals in 25 journeys. Under typical situations, she'd request another helicopter and team to pursue the assignment. But no other helicopters were ready, and the weather opportunity was shutting rapidly. She examined the damaged Apache. The rear rotor was entirely wrecked, but the power plants were still working. The primary rotor seemed undamaged. If she could lift the helicopter airborne, she could potentially operate it without the rear rotor, but it would resemble attempting to pilot a washing appliance. Santos, can you perceive me? Her co-aviator's vision opened. Riley, what occurred? We were destroyed. How do you sense? Like I was struck by a vehicle. Can we repair the craft? Riley examined the damage report on her cockpit screens. The rear rotor's destroyed, but everything else is working. I could potentially operate her without it. Santos attempted to rise, flinched, and reclined. Operating without a rear rotor is unfeasible. The rotation will spin us like a toy. Unfeasible for most aviators. Riley stated. Perhaps not unfeasible for me. She'd studied about helicopter aviators in Vietnam, who'd succeeded in operating damaged aircraft home, employing unusual methods. It demanded constant instrument inputs, flawless coordination, and a total grasp of rotorcraft physics. Most significantly, it demanded accepting that you likely wouldn't survive the effort. Riley started the power plant activation routine. The Apache's paired turbo engines accelerated typically, and the primary rotor started rotating. Without the rear rotor to supply counter-rotation, the body instantly started attempting to rotate in the reverse direction. This is madness, Santos whispered. But she started operating her instruments regardless. Riley drew vertical power and sensed the helicopter attempt to ascend. The instant it departed the surface, it started rotating forcefully. Riley opposed, with forceful lateral inputs, employing the primary rotor's surface to generate sideways force that somewhat balanced the rotation. It resembled attempting to maintain equilibrium on a rotating toy, while managing chains. Every instrument input had to be flawless, coordinated to the thousandth of a second, or the helicopter would rotate uncontrollably and impact. Somehow, impossibly, Riley lifted the Apache airborne and navigating toward the landing area. She couldn't rise beyond 50 feet, couldn't navigate faster than 80 miles per hour, and had to make constant instrument adjustments. But she was operating. Guardian Angel, Bravo 6, are you genuinely operating that craft? Confirmed. Bravo 6. Approaching for evacuation. Have 8 troops prepared for instant packing. Riley descended the damaged Apache into the landing area. Once more, the troops on the surface couldn't accept what they were witnessing. A helicopter, with no rear rotor, operating in circumstances that should have prevented flight. 8 additional troops packed into the aircraft. Riley ascended again, the helicopter rotating and jerking like an aggressive animal, but somehow remaining airborne. The journey back to headquarters was the lengthiest 15 minutes of Riley's existence. Every instant she anticipated the helicopter to rotate uncontrollably and impact, but she maintained it unified through absolute willpower and operating ability that approached the supernatural. They touched down at the medical center with a bone-rattling strike that twisted the Apache's undercarriage, but they were grounded, and 8 additional troops were secure. Riley kept the engines running. Fuel, she informed the maintenance team, and determine if you can address the rear rotor. The team leader observed the damaged helicopter in wonder. Ma'am, this aircraft should not have the ability to operate. How did you achieve it? Magic, Riley stated. How long to repair the rear rotor? Ma'am, we lack the components. This craft is immobilized. Riley examined the Apache, then at the atmosphere where storm formations were forming quickly. She had perhaps 90 minutes of operational conditions remaining, and 290 troops still surrounded in the valley. Santos, how are you sensing? Her co-aviator had been addressed by physicians and authorized for flight, like the underworld, but I can still operate the radios and armament systems. Riley reached a choice that would have resulted in military prosecution under typical situations. We're returning, every single troop, in this craft, Santos indicated at the damaged helicopter. In this craft, we've demonstrated it can operate. Now we demonstrate it can operate 36 additional occasions. For the following hour and 30 minutes, Riley Thompson executed what military researchers would subsequently describe as the most remarkable display of helicopter operation ever documented. 36 occasions she operated a catastrophically damaged Apache helicopter into a combat area that had already destroyed 3 aircraft. 36 occasions she touched down under direct hostile attack, packed troops, and somehow lifted the rotating, jerking helicopter back into the atmosphere. On the 31st journey, she received so much hostile attack that her cockpit windows shattered. On the 34th journey, 1 power plant started failing. On the 36th and final journey, as she lifted the last 8 troops from the valley, the storm system arrived with complete intensity. Lightning flashed around the damaged Apache as Riley navigated through wind gusts that would have grounded any typical aircraft. Rain hammered the shattered windshield. The helicopter rotated and bucked through the atmosphere like it desired to shake itself separate. But Riley maintained control, maintained operating, maintained surviving. She reached headquarters with the final 8 troops as the storm transformed flying genuinely unfeasible. The Apache contacted the surface one concluding occasion, and Riley ultimately powered down the engine. The roar of the turbo engines faded to quiet. Riley remained in her position, hands still gripping the instruments, unable to accept it was finished. "We completed it," Santos whispered. "We rescued them all." Riley unfastened her restraints and emerged from the destroyed helicopter on trembling limbs. Her complete body hurt. Her thoughts seemed filled with but standing on the concrete, observing medics rushed to address the final collection of rescued troops, she experienced something she hadn't permitted herself to sense throughout the entire assignment. Pride. The weeks following the rescue were chaotic. Military researchers examined the damaged Apache, attempting to comprehend how Riley had operated it without a rear rotor. Aviation specialists interviewed her for hours, documenting every detail of her method. Media outlets worldwide reported the narrative of the female aviator who'd rescued 500 troops from certain death. But Riley avoided the publicity. She was occupied composing reports, testifying at investigations, and handling the ongoing recovery of troops she'd rescued. 500 individuals owed their existence to her courage and ability, and she desired to guarantee they received the care and acknowledgement they deserved. 3 weeks following the assignment, Colonel Hayes summoned Riley to his works. When she reached, she discovered the room filled with high-ranking military leaders and authorities from Washington. "Captain Thompson," Hayes stated formally, "on account of the United States Army, I desire to acknowledge you for the most remarkable display of bravery and ability I've ever observed." Riley returned the gesture. "Commander, I was simply performing my responsibility." "Refused," Hayes stated firmly. "You performed significantly more than your responsibility. You altered what we believed was achievable." One of the Washington authorities moved forward. "Captain Thompson, I'm General Patricia Williams, Army Aviation Command. What you achieved this day will be analyzed in aviation institutions for the following 100 years. You've rescued 500 existences and demonstrated beyond any uncertainty that gender has zero connection to combat capability." Riley acknowledged. She was too drained for addresses, too depleted for festivity. All she desired was a shower and 12 hours of rest. But initially, she had a commitment to maintain. She located Captain Morrison in the aviators' common space, encircled by the other aviators who had refused to attempt the assignment. The space became quiet when she walked in. "Captain Morrison," she stated, her tone transmitting plainly in the abrupt quiet, "I trust you possess something for me." Morrison rose gradually. His expression was colorless, his look a combination of embarrassment and respect. "Captain Thompson, I was incorrect about everything about females in combat aviation, about your capabilities, about what was achievable." He stopped, inhaling deeply. "I publicly acknowledge for every uncertainty I voiced about female aviators. You've demonstrated that bravery, ability, and resolve have zero connection to gender." Riley acknowledged. Acknowledgement received. "And Captain Morrison?" "Affirmative. I'll be anticipating that highest military decoration suggestion you committed." Morrison grinned for the initial occasion that day. "Already composed, ma'am. Already composed." 3 months subsequently, Captain Riley Thompson positioned in the Rose Garden of the White House, wearing her formal uniform and obtaining the Medal of Honor from the President of the United States. The official statement read, partially, for evident bravery and fearlessness at the danger of her existence, beyond and surpassing the requirement of responsibility while functioning as aviator of an Apache helicopter during combat activity. Captain Thompson's remarkable heroism and unselfish commitment to responsibility produced the triumphant evacuation of 500 troops from inevitable death. But Riley's greatest fulfillment arrived from the correspondence she obtained a week subsequently from the Army Aviation Institution. They were establishing new preparation standards based on her methods for operating damaged aircraft, and they desired her to create the program. For the initial occasion in military record, female aviators wouldn't have to demonstrate they fit into combat aviation. Riley Thompson had demonstrated it for everyone. The female who was informed she wasn't constructed for combat operating had altered what combat operating could represent, and in accomplishing so, she'd rescued 500 existences and transformed military aviation permanently. Occasionally, the most unfeasible assignments demand not the most powerful aviator or the most skilled aviator, but the aviator who refuses to acknowledge that unfeasible signifies unfeasible. Riley Thompson was that aviator, and her narrative became legendary not because she was female but because she was remarkable. Thanks for viewing. If you enjoyed this content, you can subscribe to discover more amazing narratives like this one.